Are you prepared for an emergency or an injury? Have you ever been in a situation where someone got injured, say camping or hiking, or even a simple trip to the zoo with the kids? I remember one day I had a pounding headache. I was in my car. I remembered I had my first aid kit. I took it out only to see the aspirin expired 3 years prior. 3 years. That shows how often I was looking in my first aid kit. According to Health Day News, only 44% of Americans even have first aid kits. That means that half of all Americans don't even have the simple but necessary tools to treat an injury in an emergency. Today I'm going to show you how to pack your own first aid kit. The first thing you need to get started is storage. You need something that's sturdy, waterproof, and easy to bring around with you, and I opt to use a tackle box. That's personal preference. You could probably use a makeup box or anything you really want. I use this. It's small. It has a lot of room. It's easy to find online and in stores and runs you about $10 usually. For smaller first aid kits, I usually use gallon size Ziploc bags, slider bags, to keep everything in because it's waterproof and it's really easy to put in a backpack for small trips with my kids. The next thing you want to pack is something to clean your hands. I opt for antibacterial wet wipes. I get these at the dollar store along with just some good old hand sanitizer. They're easy enough to store and they do the job. The next thing I pack are two different types of medical gloves. I pack latex ones and vinyl ones. Some people do have a latex allergy, so it's good to have another option on hand. You don't want to have an allergic reaction while trying to treat someone else's injury. So the next thing that I pack is tweezers and alcohol pads. You can pack about 10 alcohol pads. Alcohol pads are really just to sterilize the tweezers. You don't want to use rubbing alcohol or hydrogen peroxide on any sort of injury, even though people do say that it's good to do. I mean, it kills germs, but it also causes tissue damage and it hurts really bad usually. So these are only to clean tweezers or scissors if you prefer those in your first aid kit. To clean an injury, I keep a bottle of water and some really mild soap, ivory dish soap, any soap that you prefer that's mild to clean the wound. You just clean it like you would at home, but it's just to go. The next thing that I pack is Q-tips. I put 5 Q-tips in a Ziploc bag, and this is to go with the Neosporin or triple antibiotic ointment, Polysporin, whatever your preference is, to put over your injury after it's cleaned to help it heal. Q-tips are so important, though, to keep everything sanitary. You put a little on here, and then you wipe it on your wound. Assorted gauze pads are the next step. After your wound is cleaned and treated with antibiotic ointment, you want it to be covered. These are obviously for larger injuries, abrasions, scrapes, and stuff that you don't want to cover with like 10 Band-Aids. So I do an assortment, 4x4s, 3x3s, 2x2s. These are all good to cover your wound if it's bigger than a Band-Aid. Roller gauze is another thing. These come in sealed packages because you want them sterile. And the gauze pads can be covered with the waterproof medical tape that you will pack next in your first aid kit. You don't want to use the paper kind as it peels off relatively easy. The waterproof is really a great option. These bandages are also great for sprains. I keep them on hand at all times in case anyone rolls their ankle or hurts their wrist at the park or something. It's easy to immobilize and wrap up. You can find these at any local drugstore as well. The next thing I pack is waterproof bandages. Waterproof is so important to me as my kids can lose anything and they like to just rip off their Band-Aids to look at things or use them as stickers. The waterproof ones I get at any local pharmacy or drugstore or dollar store even. I keep them in a Ziploc bag so that they don't get wet if something gets wet in there. But they're really a lot harder to take off than just the standard Band-Aids. The next thing that I like to pack in mine is pain management. I don't put aspirin in mine. I use ibuprofen and Tylenol because you can alternate those. And then I also pack the children's version. along with a cup. Make sure you have the cup because otherwise you can't really eyeball how much medicine you're giving your child. Along with pain management, I pack a thermometer. If you're gone overnight somewhere, it is great to have the option to see how high your fever is if you suddenly get sick with something. And then pack extra ear protectors in a separate Ziploc bag. The next thing that I pack is cold compresses. You crack them, they're cold for so long, and then you throw them out. Make sure to replace these if you use them. There's been instances where I didn't, and then I just don't have them. So these are really important. And then I also usually throw in another bag or two just to throw some ice in. If you're out somewhere, you can throw ice in bag, and it's a little easier than using one of these because if you have ice, it's just better. The last of the things that I pack are hydrocortisone cream. These are great for bug bites, for rashes. They're just great to have on hand for any little of those emergency situations where someone's really itchy and it's bothering them. A couple things I pack in mine that aren't really that important, but I always keep on hand are tissues. I always keep tissues in my first aid kit. They're good for if someone gets sick, and they're also good to wipe anything that's wet. So if you have a wound that is covered in water, you can kind of wipe it off first too. And chapstick. Cracked lips, especially with kids, I always have chapstick on hand. With all this information being given to you, and now you have the tools to create your own first aid kit, I hope we can bridge the gap between 44 and 100 and hopefully someday get to at least 75 to 80% of Americans being prepared in the case of an emergency.